Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Committee of a Whole for April 10th. If our clerk could please read the roll.
Councilmember Wood,
Here.
Councilmember Garza,
Here.
Councilmember Hussein,
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor,
Here.
Councilmember Spitzley,
Here.
Councilmember Jackson,
Present.
Councilmember Brown,
Present.
Councilmember Cost.
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you. The first item of business we have are the minutes for April 3rd. Vice President Garza.
All right, I'd like to move the minutes of April 3rd as written.
We have the minutes before us. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. This is an opportunity for the public. If they have public comment, if you could please come up to the podium and state your name and for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Is there anyone from the public at this time that would like to address the body? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on into our body of work this evening. And just so that we're clear about what we're doing, as we go through our presentations, council will have an opportunity to ask questions. When we have the departmental budget presentations, at that time, after those are done, we will turn it over to the internal auditor who has some questions, and then we'll open it up for council questions at that time. So we will start off with our community development block grant budget presentation, and if ladies, you could come forward and take a seat at the table, making sure that the green light is on. Council members, in your packets, your large packets, under A, you have a PowerPoint that the department is going to present. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, they're keyed and ready for you.
Okay. Good evening. Okay. So I'm here to talk briefly about the annual action plan for fiscal year 23-24. First of all, I just want to mention that as many of you know, or all of you probably know, we have a 5-year plan, which is considered which our 5-year plan was from 2022 to 2026, and this year we are into the second year of our 5-year plan. So I can't really talk about the action plan without talking about the consolidated plan. So the consolidated plan, as I mentioned, is created every 5 years. It's a plan based on community needs. Will assist the city on how to spend federal funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, include such items as housing, public services,
It's
economic.
number 3, I'm sorry, in your committee of a whole packet, the black one.
That's okay.
Okay. Not a problem.
I know sometimes we all
Right.
get a little. Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Economic development, homelessness issues. And so what is our annual action plan? It's our 1-year plan. It's from, this current one is for fiscal year 2023 that covers the time period July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. And it supports the goals and objectives and strategies of our 5-year plan. It functions as our annual application to HUD to request funds. So in other words, we have to submit this document in order to get our federal funding. So if we don't submit it by the due date, then we're at jeopardy of not receiving any funds. And this document covers community development block grant, home dollars, and emergency solutions grant. So what is community development block grant? Community development block grant program provides funding for community revitalization purposes and may be used for activities that fulfill one of three national objectives: the benefit to persons of low and moderate income, elimination of blight, slum and blight, and urgent community needs. CDBG funds can be used to fund activities such as housing, economic development, public services, public facilities, acquisition and demolition. The home program, home investment partnership program, provides funding for such activities as down payment assistance, new construction and housing rehabilitation activities that create home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income households. Our Emergency Solutions Program provides funding to assist homeless persons, and there are 6 eligible components of that: rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, street outreach, emergency shelter, homeless management information system, or what we refer to as HMIS, and administration. I've also provided a funding history of the amounts that we received for those funding from 2015 to the present. And as you can see in review of our funding, that, it varies the amount. Sometimes we may have a decrease or sometimes it's an increase. Our funding is based on a formula. This year, we did receive our allocations early, so our action plan have the actual funding amounts in there. If you can see from the previous year, we had a slight increase of less than 1% for CDBG and home, and about 3% increase of our ESG funds. Last year, we received 175,479, and this year we have 181,593. The next map shows where the CDBG eligible areas are, and then some of the following slides will show you some of our economic development projects. And our economic development project, public services, our kids camp activities, emergency housing rehab program for the city of Lansing, and we have rental rehab. So that shows you some of the projects that we have going on. Also, we have is this Tuesday Toolman? Tuesday Toolman. That's funded from our public services activities. So the annual action plan is a citizen-driven plan. So far, we've had a couple public hearings before our Lansing Planning Board. Our citywide public hearing on community needs was held on December the 6th, and then we held a public hearing on February the 7th, and our public hearing before you is scheduled for April the 24th. Right now, the annual action plan is in draft form, and the comment period is from March the 23rd through April the 24th. The document is due to HUD on May the 14th. And I just want to go over briefly. I know some of you are probably familiar with what we submit to HUD. Just go over briefly with how we submit this document. The document is submitted via HUD reporting tool that we refer to as IDIS, or our Integrated Disbursement Information System. And there's a template on that system where we have to address several issues. We have to address administration, who's the lead person or lead agency on this, and the city of Lansing, our department, is the lead agency on there. Then there are different sections of the plan. There are other things that we have to submit with the plan, supporting documentation. We need to get a signature from the mayor, certification, and so forth. So, there's a lot more involved in there. Then we have an executive summary. We talk about our consultation process, our participation process. So the participation, how we engage our citizens to talk about the action plan and or even the consolidated plan. Our expected resources for this year, community development block grant and home dollars. Not only are we using our federal allocations for both of those projects, but also previous year funds and program income will also be included with the CDBG and home, but with the ESG, it's just the 181,593. Our annual goals, there are 5 goals that we have identified. Number 1, affordable housing. 2, homelessness. 3, provision of public services and other needed services. 4, public facilities and infrastructure improvements. And 5, program administration. And so those are the goals that we have identified, and then we create projects based on that. And so we have several projects, dollar amounts, the expected outcome of those different projects, and those are all identified in the action plan. And there are other sessions in there. We work with the Lansing Housing Commission on public housing, and when I work with various agencies and organizations in the community to assist with providing information for the action plan. So I work with the Lansing Housing Commission, and usually when I request the information from Doug Fleming, the executive director, I give him about 2 weeks to get the information to me, and he turns it around in 2 days. So, that's a good thing. Also, I deal with the homeless and other special needs activities. I work with the Human Relations and Community Services, and also the Continuum of Care to gather information about the homeless population. So that's how most of this information is put together. Also, the document includes other activities and program-specific requirements for our CDBG, home, and ESG grants. So that gives you an idea. We submit that, like I said, on May 14th of each year to our to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present this evening, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you. First, I just want to remind council members that even though the budget that they gave us at this particular time, once the formula is done and comes back, it could be increased or decreased, and then we'll see that as a final document that's sent to council. Before I go to Councilmember Spitzley, I wanted to just quick ask the internal auditor, did she have any questions on the community development block grant?
None. No, not at this time.
All of that for that. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Spitzley.
Oh, before you start, we did receive our actual allocations.
That's what I was gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I
So
was gonna.
these are the actual numbers that we
Okay.
are.
All right. Thank you.
I mean, that's rare, but we did get it early this time, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. I was gonna clarify that. That's the one thing. Doris, thank you for that, presentation. I just have a couple questions. So, in your document, you talk about, the COC having a strategic plan. what's the coordination between the COC strategic plan and this action plan? Do you guys, are you part of helping to develop it? Do you review it? I mean, what's your involvement with that?
Absolutely. I've been involved with the COC for about 20-some years, and I make sure that our plans coincide with whatever is in the strategic plan with the COC, that it is also included in our plan as well.
Couple more, Madam President. please.
Go ahead.
So, as I'm looking at, what are some of the eligible items for the CDBG, one of them, you talk about, urgent community need, elimination of slum and blight, and acquisition and demolition. And, so, do you guys, does the CDBG, go to tearing down homes, or how's that work?
It can, and sometimes we utilize CDBG funds. We have provided funds to the Ingham County Land Bank in the past for demolition of properties. Also, we utilize FEMA funds to purchase and demolish properties in the floodplains. There have been, in the past, certain circumstances in which we've had to supplement that project with community development block grant funds.
But you don't help fund the make safe and demolish?
No, we do not.
All right. And then for acquisition, well, let's just back up. So the CDBG grant, the dollars, you guys are like a flow through, right, to other entities, or are you?
In some circumstances, we are. We pass them to a subrecipient, but in other circumstances, we carry out programs through our office and our own staff.
Okay. I'd be interested in which ones those are. I mean, if you could just send me an email, that would be great, of which programs you carry out. How do you ensure that the funds that are flowing through are being used correctly? Do you do annual audits? Do you do spot auditing? But how do you make sure that the grant dollars are used for the purposes they're supposed to?
Right. So for every organization, we execute a contract so that we have a written contract. And then every year, we do yearly monitoring of our subrecipients. We receive a host of documents about 2 inches thick that provide us with their annual audit and their most recent financial statements, information on their board of directors, their chart of accounts. We also, every time they bill, we're reviewing what they're billing us for to ensure that we have the proper documentation. Everything is reimbursement based, so they have to provide us with proof that they have paid money out before we will reimburse them. And then we also, are ensuring that those are eligible costs. So there's several layers.
Okay, and then you talk about that there's a good consultation process among the city departments, MISHDA, and the COC. What does that mean?
The consultation process between MISHDA.
In your annual report, you talk about that. Is that part of the COC, the consultation process, or is it a separate thing where you guys all get together? What does that mean?
No, we consult with them. We consult with MISHDA and the COC on a regular basis, whether through meetings or
Okay.
whatever,
It's not like okay, that's what I meant. It's not like a defined thing where you get the departments, MISHDA, and the COC together and talk about things. It's just an ongoing.
It's pretty much ongoing, like through
Okay.
meetings or things of that nature. So we're always consulting with them.
Okay, I'll let somebody else answer questions. Thank you. 'Cause I have a ton.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, President Wood. Thank you all for being here this evening. In the past, I know we were talking about home ARPA dollars and the need for congregate housing, the CBDG money along with the home. Is that something that those funds can be used for as well? Just want to kind of get the understanding of the bigger picture.
Right, so it was the home ARP funding that we'd talked about for non-congregate shelter.
Yeah.
And yes, as a matter of fact, we just came in a month or so ago, and we amended the 2020 and 21 action plan to provide, I think, 800 and some $1,000 of community development block grant to be utilized for non-congregate shelter as well as the home ARP. So yes,
Oh,
so this is
fantastic.
pretty flexible funding.
Fantastic. I know you had spoken about that, so thank you for that. And lastly, I know we have spoken in the past about technical assistance in the CBDG being kind of difficult to navigate through. Has there been any solutions to ensure that, groups or individuals doing service in the community that would be appropriate to use these funds have technical assistance to make sure that they're meeting those requirements and getting high audit scores as you've defined?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. So is there, for different groups that are providing services, Councilwoman Spitzley was talking about like pass-through in different agencies, and how are you making sure that they're doing a good job? And you just described that. Is there any technical assistance for organizations, to ensure that they have the support so they can do a good job as far as administratively when they are contracted to do services?
Do we provide technical assistance to our organizations? I think that we don't provide formal technical assistance, but if they need assistance, we make our staff available to provide assistance. And I guess if they needed technical assistance, we would provide that as well if there was a new regulation or a new hurdle that they had to make. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, or Vice President Garza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Thanks for being here this evening. I'm just going to expand a little bit and maybe ask for a little more clarification of what Councilwoman Patricia Spitzley said. She mentioned about the elimination of slum and blight, the acquisition and demolition of properties. And I know you mentioned that you don't necessarily get involved with make safe or demolish, but I'm looking under here and it says, the rental rehabilitation. So CBD fund, are you using those funds to contract services out as far as like contractors to tear down this, get rid of the blight and the slum and?
As I said, we have provided a Ingham County Land Bank with grant in the past so that they could eliminate or demolish properties that they have received through tax foreclosure that were too blighted to rehabilitate and sell.
Okay, so it's only Ingham County Land Bank that's doing that kind of work?
Yes, except for the fact that, like I said, we do partner with, the city receives a grant, a FEMA grant through the state police, and that allows us to purchase and demolish homes in the floodplain. And sometimes we have to supplement that grant with community development block grant funds. That's only happened a couple of times.
Okay, I guess basically the reason why my question was just making sure that whoever is tearing down these properties, that they're certified in, asbestos abatement and
Yep.
that type of stuff.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we've just finished a monitoring where HUD came into our office and monitored our community development block grant program. And one of the things that they looked at was our contract with the Ingham County Land Bank from, I think, 2021.
Okay.
And they did not have any issues with that at all.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. Just a question about going from the general to the specific, because every year, just not having a great background, I just always hear just like generalized things with all this money attached when we talk about CDBG and specifically the Emergency Solutions Grant and how the goals and eligible activities are homelessness prevention, street outreach, and emergency shelter, which has been a very relevant topic around lately. So can you give some specifics on how the money is supposed to address that, or like who do you hire and how does that work?
Okay, we receive community development block grant, home dollars, and emergency solutions grant, and then we have our human relations and community services department manage the emergency solutions grant program. So that department is responsible for, managing that grant. And I know that, I work closely with them, and I know that, we have processes, which we are in the process now. We pretty much have a formal process where we just sent out a notice that funding is available, and we just met with people that are interested in utilizing some of the funds, and we had an informational meeting today to talk about the ESG program, both the ESG program, the city ESG, and the Mister program. And so those applicants were, or those interested parties had a presentation on what ESG was responsible for, the funding that is available, and when they can apply and so forth. And so we set deadline dates and, things of that nature, and when the applications are due and so forth. And so we will review the information. We have people that will review the applications as well, so.
Okay.
Just a little follow-up. So my understanding is that you can't really you don't know the specifics about, because you said applicants, and it just goes back, the ESG's we have this document, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. So it's been allocated in the past. It's just HRCS manages it.
Mm-hmm.
And the people you're talking about this year who did a presentation, are they the same as last year, or you're not sure about any of that?
The people who did the presentation?
Well, you said that there's been agencies that are applying, and you're putting out how to tell other agencies about it and let everybody know what it's good for.
Right.
But then this has been allocated for years in the past, so I guess, is it like, has agencies taken advantage of it in the past? Or have we used the money in the past for the things that were mentioned, like the emergency shelter or anything?
They have to be used for that. And yeah, the whatever the money is out there for, that's what we have to use it for. So I guess.
So it's just HRCS, they know where all the money went and which agencies used it. Because you said it's used, so I just wondered if you could just help me, who wants just to hear some specifics about like the emergency shelter money, just like, oh, well, we did $100,000 to Advent House because it just increased their space or availability, for example. I don't know. I just wonder if you knew.
I do, but I don't have that in front of me right now. Who got what, because I'm responsible for putting that information in our IDIS system, who gets what and whatever. But, we've just started the process right now, so we still have to get applications in and evaluate those applications. So, Advent House may come in and apply for the funding and receive the funding, or, I don't know what agencies are gonna, they were, of course, part of the meeting today, but there were some other agencies there as well. So whoever applies, if they meet the qualifications and so forth, and they, have the score, then, they may get funding. So, I guess it just depends.
Okay. Thank you.
We can list it as one of our questions that we'll get back to you with, if you could supply what funding went out this year, that'd be great, this fiscal year.
Yeah, I'll be glad to do that. I don't have
Yeah.
it in front of me right now.
And we understand that, not a problem.
I remember numbers in my head, but I can't remember. So,
That's all right,
Okay.
that's all right. Okay, if there's no other questions, then we will move on as part of our presentation. Later on in the agenda, we will be setting the public hearing for this.
Thank you.
Next, we have the fiscal year 2023, 2024 budget general overview. And in your packet, that would be C. So if you grab that, it's got the yellow, sort of chartreuse green. Yeah, we're running out of colors. And we will handle this the same as we did the other one. After the presentation, we will turn to the internal auditor, and then after that, we'll open it up for council member questions.
Hello, I'm Jackson Mills, and I'll be presenting the fiscal year 24 proposed budget. I don't know if is it on? I do have a slideshow.
Faith, we're ready for the slides on the proposed budget. There you go.
Oh.
You're up.
Perfect.
You're down. You're up. Whatever you're doing, stop touching it.
Did it move slides? Yes. Perfect. All right, thank you. All right. So, just some of the sources and the assumptions for this, the proposed budget. So, a lot of the sources came from the departments themselves. So, they were sent out budget instructions in November of 2022, and they returned their budgets December, January 23, and February 23. Historical trends, those were based on fees from other departments and other revenue sources. So departments, and we looked at historical trends, what the actuals were, and estimated what fiscal year 24 could be.
Jackson, can I have you pull that mic just a little bit closer?
Yes,
or
of course.
for you to talk a little
Yeah.
bit louder? Okay.
And then as far as projections, we are assuming a 5% property and income tax increase for the upcoming year. We're also assuming stricter enforcement in our income tax. We're also assuming all 3% wage increases for the upcoming fiscal year. And we're also, the new public safety millage, the 3.9 mils, we assumed it was over $10 million in taxable value that's coming in. And we confirmed that with Baird, our bond counsel, as well. So as far as the citywide budget was $275 million this year. And this increased roughly 13% compared to last approved fiscal year. And this is because of a few things. The community development increased due to a $5 million grant for DLI. For example, their expenditures last approved fiscal year was just over $700,000, but in the proposed budget, it's about $4.4 million. As far as general government, increased due to pensions and health care, which we'll get into later, and higher capital expenditures. Capital expenditures increased by over $2 million in the general fund and over $5.5 million overall. And obviously the public safety building, that adds an extra $10+ million to the citywide budget as well, that wasn't in last year's budget because it was recently approved in November of last year. So where the money comes from, the general fund revenues was about $153 million. The main sources of revenue for the general fund are property taxes.
He needs you to go back one,
Back one?
there, okay.
Nope. The
Nope.
one that says general fund revenues.
I could read it.
And where the money comes from.
I can't see anything.
Faith?
Nope, that's the property tax one. It should be the one right before that. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So the main source of revenue for general fund revenue are property taxes, income taxes, return on equity, and state shared revenues. These represent 91% of general fund revenues. So property taxes are one of our more stable sources of income, totaling just over $500.5 million. The city assessor estimated a 5% increase in property value due to housing market and uncapping of taxes. Income taxes are also estimated a 5% increase due to more businesses, state tapes, and higher enforcement efforts by the department. Return on equity, BWL will increase in revenue, and therefore our return on equity from them will be $26.5 million. And the state shared revenues, those include multiple sources, so our sales tax, medical marijuana excise tax, and liquor license fees.
Can you just give me the state revenue sharing number, please?
State revenue sharing number?
It's 22,424,475.
Yep. And this is the breakdown of the property taxes. So 1 mil will go for parks, 1 mil for the roads, 1.5 mil for police, 1.5 mil for fire, leaving about $38 million for general operations. And this page just further breaks down the entire general fund revenue portion. And so just things of note, the proposed fee changes for fiscal year 24 can be found in the back of the proposed budget book. And most of these fees estimates came from the departments themselves, so parks and district court. Fines and forfeitures, those came directly from the district court. So if you have questions on those, I'd be more happy to get you information from them. And interest and revenues are where the $291,000 of the ARPA interest earnings are proposed to be in. That's why it's increasing by 88.2%. And then other revenues include donations for Ramadan dinner, veteran commissions, and things of that nature that weren't in that didn't have numbers last fiscal year. Overall, the general fund revenues increased about 5% from last year. General fund expenditures are about $164 million, and you'll hear more about each department's budgets throughout the next month. Retirement and fixed fringes make up over 29% of general fund expenditures. This represents an 8.5% increase in the dollar amount from the current fiscal year. Fleet expenses also went up considerably. This cost was allocated by department by the Public Service Department themselves, and this involves certain equipment rentals. This is also where the basic human needs, the 1.35% of general fund revenues ordinance, that comes in. And then city-supported agencies, we're proposing $300,000 towards Advanced Peace, a program to reduce gun violence. Other agencies include Arts and Cultures Grants, My Brother's Keeper, Sister Cities, Community Corrections Advisory, Greater Lansing Safety Council, and LEAP support. So when looking at the line items, you might notice that there are fringe benefits, and fringe benefits are split between fixed and variable benefits. Fringe variables are hard to predict because they're obviously more variable. They're based on number of vacancies, new positions added or removed from the city budget, and their wages. Variable fringes include FICA, Medicare, defined contribution match, healthcare, dental, disability, life insurance. The budget for fiscal year 24 is $16.2 million. FICA and Medicare is estimated at $3.3 million. The city pays 6.2% of non-police and fire wages towards Social Security and 1.45% of all wages towards Medicare. Active employee health care totals about $10.9 million. These are directly tied to individual employee plans and their respective rates. Overall, this represents about a $1 million increase from the last year's budget. Fixed fringes are budgeted for $59.5 million. As stated, the retirement fixed benefits make up over 29% of general fund expenditures. The numbers used to calculate the fixed fringes came from Greg Stump from Boomershine, our actuary, and the HR department. Fixed fringes include workers' comp, miscellaneous benefits, but mostly it's pension contribution and retiree healthcare and dental. So the pension contributions for the proposed fiscal year is $34.5 million, including amortization, which is the proportion of the annual city contribution toward unfunded actuarial accrued liability, and the normal cost, the portion of the annual city contribution represents 1 year's accrual benefits. These amounts are estimated by our actuary on an annual basis and based on demographic data as of January 1st, 2022, and a negative 14% investment return. Retiree healthcare and dental costs was estimated for $21.5 million as determined by our actuary. And workers' compensation and miscellaneous benefits, which includes unemployment and paying out remaining vacation, sick, and personal leave, when an employee leaves the city, increased to almost $3.5 million. And those numbers came from the HR department. So overall, if you compare last year's to this year's, it is about a $5 million increase. As for the fee changes, I'll let the departments talk about their methodology as to why they're increasing. But these are just the areas that departments have proposed. A more detailed list can be found in the back of the budget book in the first couple pages of the resolution. As for CIP projects, there's a total of over $39 million of proposed capital improvement projects. This represents over 14% of the budget and an 11% increase in capital expenditures compared to last year. Some ones to note, obviously each department will go more into depth. CSO projects, 34E is about $2.7 million, 15 South, 3.3, and I apologize, it says $6 million, but it should be $7 million for CSO 16 and 17. That was about $1 million. For Parks and Rec CIPs, the capital projects total about $1.9 million. Those are in the proposed budget book. Parking, about $375,000 for a parking study, security cameras, and construction and maintenance. Vehicles and equipment, $7.2 million for various sewer equipment, fleet, and trash carts. And then there is $1.4 million for stadium improvements. We are currently looking at getting most of that money back from various grants, but just to be on the safe side, we wanted to be more conservative and put that number in the budget. And then we have $2.1 million for federal surface transportation program and $575,000 for new sidewalks, sidewalk repairs, sidewalk gap closures, and trailways. And obviously each department can provide a more detailed analysis as to what the program will do. So that's just the general overview, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, we'll first go to Emily, and then I have Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
No?
What about now? Is that better? All right, well, thank you both for being here. Sorry to steal your mic.
Is it on?
This one's on, yep. So I have a few questions for you both. What date did former Deputy Director, Budget Director, Joe McClure retire?
He officially retired at the end of February.
Okay. So as a follow-up question, he is listed as preparing the budget book along with you, Jackson. What involvement did the finance director have in preparing the budget book?
I helped along the way with reviewing it and checking over the numbers, making sure that the numbers made sense.
Okay, so your eyes were on it every step? Okay, great. Next, and you explained a bit of this, which I appreciate, the reasoning behind some of your increases to different revenues. Can you talk a little bit about 5% increase to income taxes a lot? And I know you said it's because the department is, trying to improve enforcement. What steps are you taking to ensure that's happening?
Every year we do order the state tapes, and that helps us to collect more money that is due to the city that someone didn't file, but they filed the state. They actually live in the city. They didn't file city's returns. So we're able to go after them and get that money that is due to us. Brings in quite a bit of money, and so we do that every year. So that has worked. In addition to any new businesses, making sure that new business have withholdings and that are on our systems, and we're collecting from them also.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then also for the BWL return on equity, how was that number calculated?
So we actually talk with the CFO and to the CEO over there to get their projections, and they were able to confirm that for us.
So their projections, when I talked to them, were about 25.038. So I'm wondering, just so you know, you also have two different numbers throughout the book. You have 26.5 at one place and 26.8 at some other places. So how did you make that jump to the 26.5 or 26 point? Can you guys hear me?
They're having trouble hearing you over there.
Okay, sorry. I might have to not look at you guys
That's
while
okay.
I ask these.
No problem. Thank you.
So how did you get to this 26.5 or 26.8 number from BWL's own projections that were 25.038 approximately?
So we talked to them after they did their, came before you all and did their presentation, just to confirm and let them know what we were, and even based on our current year numbers, and that's how we got to it. We did have a conversation with us, and they were able to confirm it.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm just a little confused because I got these numbers from them last week. So, I mean, if it's going to be higher, that's, phenomenal. But I would like to know, how and when that number was gotten to.
No, I was just going to say that extra 300,000 that actually comes from the sewer return on equity, not the BWL.
Okay.
So that's why you might see the 26.5 versus the 26.8.
Okay, that's helpful. But if I could still get
And
answers.
we'll confirm that, but we did talk to the CEO, and he was the one who confirmed that for us.
Okay, great. Yeah, because that's a pretty big difference in revenue. So if we could get that confirmed. And then, so for ARPA money this year, it, 8.2 about is being used to balance FY24. Is that all of the ARPA money that was put aside for revenue loss for this year?
Yep, so that 9.7 and that 8.2, those equal out to $18 million. And then there was the $5 million that went to the parking fund as well. So
Okay.
in total, the revenue loss was $23 million.
Right. I guess if you could just clarify, because publicly on record it said 11 million was going to be used for FY24 for revenue loss. So where is that extra $2.8 million?
So you said $11 million for?
Yep, it said 11 million for the same purpose of revenue loss during fiscal year 2024.
Do you know what page that's on by chance?
Not in the budget book. This is a public Lansing State Journal article that Desiree was quoted in saying that.
Oh,
So I'll have to get back with you, but
Okay.
after we did all our calculations from last year's audit to this year's, that's how we came up with the numbers, the changes. So last year, but
Okay,
I'll
yeah,
confirm
if
that
I
with
could
you.
just see, where that 2.8 is now, that would be great.
Yep.
And then I noticed there wasn't a 5-year budget projection included. Is that something that you would be able to provide for council so we
Yes,
can
we
look at
will.
that? Okay, great. And then was ARPA interest incorporated into the budget? And if so, where would that be?
Yep, so on the, forget what slide, but on just the general fund breakdown, the one that increased 88.2%, that's where the 290,000 is proposed to go.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
Yep.
And then jumping ship a little bit to vacancy factor. So looking back at historical budgets, the vacancy factor was approximately 500 to 700K until around COVID. FY23 is 700K. You guys obviously jumped quite a bit to 1.5 million. Does the city anticipate more trouble than usual filling positions, or how was the number gotten to? And can you just provide a little bit about what went into your formula there?
Yeah, so I believe the fiscal year 22 budget, I think it was $1.4 million in vacancies, and then last year it was split in half to about 700,000. But as we've provided to council and the vacancy factor reports, it's obviously been much bigger than the 700,000. So we wanted to increase that to about 1.5.
Okay, so that's great. But like, what was the formula that went into figuring that out?
I wouldn't say there was an exact formula for it, but just looking at the vacancy factors, what HR has been trying to do in postings, they feel comfortable with that number as well.
Okay. So without ARPA funds, it appears the general fund would be decreasing about 12 million, and with, the ARPA funds, it's still reducing fund balance by about 3.6 million. Has anything been done in this budget to try to address the structural deficit that the city is facing?
Not in this budget as we're presenting it, but we are looking at that information moving forward. There's a team working on that, as I stated once before in the quarterly meeting, in her quarterly presentation.
Can I ask, we've been hearing about the structural deficit since 2019, so I'm just curious as to, why there's nothing to address it in this budget.
Yeah, we're aware of that. Yeah,
Okay.
we're working on it.
And then so this is about the local streets fund, so jumping over to page 11. So why the 70% increase to major maintenance, and does finance have a plan for the depleting Act 51 numbers and how we're gonna pay for all of that?
Right here.
Oh, yeah. So in talks with Public Service, they wanted to have one central location for a line item for multiple different projects.
Okay.
And so that big increase involves multiple different projects. And they can give you a detailed explanation as to the financial breakdown between those two, but that is the overall number.
Okay, and then for the second part of that, is there a plan for the Act 51 money that's, once that's gone, what's the plan?
We're working on a plan. We don't have a set plan at the time, but those are all things that we're having conversations about.
Okay, can I ask that as soon as there is a plan that is given over to us?
Yes.
And then jumping over to page 14 for Tri-County Metro, can you explain the significant decrease in expenditure and just a little more about the city's financial relationships and obligations related to the Tri-County Task Force?
So I know Joe had put together that one. He had previously worked in the police department for, I believe, 3 years as their budget supervisor. And so he worked hand in hand with the police department in putting those together. So we can get answers from the police department as to why those expenditures might be less than what was done last year.
Okay, that would be great, along with what the city's financial obligations are to the task force. And so now moving to the Building Safety Fund on page 15. So Can you explain the projected decrease in revenues for the building safety fund and what the strategy is behind having a significant fund balance in that fund?
See here. Let me go to my line item sheet for you. You said building safety fund?
Yep, page 15.
Okay. So it looks like building permits went down about $100,000 in revenue. Plan reviews, same, $100,000. Those look like those are the major decreases in revenues, but I can have EDP confirm as to why they projected those revenues themselves.
And EDP will be up.
Yeah.
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 Okay, thank you. And then a little bit more maybe about the financial strategy behind leaving such a significant fund balance in that fund. Can you speak to that at all?
Again, those are all part of our plans and discussions that we're having right now as we look at the city's 5-year plan moving forward.
And obviously, you know, with these enterprise funds, we want to, you know, shift as many expenses as we can to ones that have significant fund balance so that it doesn't hurt the general fund as much. So we are definitely looking at those as well.
Okay, thank you. And so moving on to parking fund, everyone's favorite. Can you speak a little bit to why the parking fund continues to run at a structural deficit? And this may, you know, be about your long-term plan that you guys are now looking at, but does the city have a plan to address this? And when do you estimate the parking fund will be out of money and into a deficit?
Well, it is running about, for the proposed, well, last year it was about $100 million deficit, and then this proposed is about $775,000, leaving about a $2.5 million fund balance. So if those were to just stay the same, it would be about a 2-year solvency.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry about that. No.
Okay.
No, $1 million. I apologize.
They don't think I be listening.
Yeah. And obviously, EDP speaking tonight, so they'll have a chance to talk about parking.
Sure, but there's no overall financial strategy at this point to make sure the parking fund doesn't continue to run at a structural deficit?
That's all part of the discussions
Part
that
of
we
the
are
plan.
having.
Part of the plan, okay.
Part of the plan.
Can you explain a little bit about the opioid settlement funds that the city is getting and how they'll be used in the police and fire departments? And then as a follow-up, are they included in general fund revenues? And have the funds been received? And if so, what's the dollar amount?
So yes, we have received roughly $368,000. We're going to do a budget amendment for this fiscal year, and our proposal is that the money goes to police, fire, and HRCS.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then can you also please provide a general explanation of how the public safety fund is going to work, the new fund that was set up for the millage?
So it's restricted money, so once we start collecting it, it's going to be set aside in a separate bank account to pay the debt, to pay down the debt. First debt payment is due December of this year. So it's set aside not to be touched, not to be commingled with any other funds.
Okay. And then kind of as a follow-up about that fund, is the city planning on paying off the debt for service in the first year, or is that line item supposed to be capital on page 25?
So that's the proposed, if we, I'm not sure what our total drawdowns were going to be for the fiscal year, next fiscal year, but we'll pay those debts as required by the agreements.
Okay, so that is correct, that is the debt service line item there.
That's our estimate of what we thought based on the total property taxable value for the properties in the city, how we came up with those numbers.
Okay. And then Can you explain a little bit about how the IT charges are split between departments, what kind of formula is used there, and all of those services?
I
Yeah,
think
so-
we're gonna have IT up.
Yeah.
Right, but
They might be able to answer it as well.
yeah, not necessarily the IT aspect of it, but just do you have a formula for how that is financially split up between the departments?
Yeah, does those allocations, so
Okay.
it's based
Okay,
on.
Christopher is giving me a thumbs up, so I can ask him about it.
Okay.
Thank you. And then, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, again, maybe you're going to tell me this is a question for a different department, which is totally fine, but why is the city initiating 2.2 million in capital project improvements while the fund balance is falling? Can you tell me a little bit about what that strategy is?
Yeah, so some of the CSO projects are through administrative orders by the state, so they have to be done at this
Right,
time.
some, but not all, correct?
Some, but not all. Most are mandatory.
Okay.
So these have been, ongoing issues. They've sort of been put off, and now state's really coming to step in, having us make those changes. So that's why there is that increase there.
Okay. So switching gears a little bit to talk about some of the OPEB liability, how does changing from PAYGO to ADC impact OPEB liability overall? Can you explain that?
So we're still in the process of switching over. Our plan is to switch over this fiscal year, which, as was just talked about, that ideally is to pay down our debt, our liability sooner, because the plan can pay the premium on those, and whatever the city pays then goes directly into the investments. We're working through the process of that with our actuaries and our insurance carriers.
Okay, so at this time, you don't know how it impacts OPEB liability?
Now, we know that it will, from my understanding, it will pay down the liability, because what we will be paying in will be paying towards the investment, or paying down that liability.
Okay. Does the increase to retirement and fixed benefits that you talked about in your presentation in the internal services fund take the OPEB increases into account, or does that just reflect pension changes?
No, it reflects both.
Can we get a breakdown of how that reflects both? Because, yeah, I just didn't see the numbers match up. Were consensus revenue estimating conferences and the governor's recommendations for revenue sharing taken into account when you were doing your revenue sharing estimates? And if so, what data was used?
Yeah, the mayor had received a report about the estimated for the sales tax revenue constitutional, and I forget the name of the other one, but he did receive those, the state reports.
So those were taken into account when
Yes.
you did, okay. And then, have we updated our chart of accounts to comply with the new Department of Treasury standard?
We're working with that. We were on the phone last week with Maynard, our CPA firm, and then also with Central Square. And so that is in the works right now.
Do we have any sort of timeline for when that's supposed to happen?
Before the end of fiscal year is the goal.
Okay, so before July 1?
Yes.
That's supposed to happen?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions for right now.
All right, thank you. I have Councilmember Spitzley, Councilmember Spatafor, Councilmember Hussein.
Thank you, Madam President. This is for our internal auditor. Did you say that the budget book, it says the author is Joe McClure and,
Yes, it says Joe McClure and Jackson Mills.
okay, so question is, why, is that just I don't understand that. Why is that?
Well, the budget book was in preparation since November, and so him and I worked hand in hand on working with it, and I wanted to give him, I didn't want to take all the credit for it. So that's why his name is in there as well, because he came up with a lot of the numbers as well.
The study that we're hearing about, I remember when we were talking about parking, and the $5 million that we had to use out of ARPA dollars to shore up the parking, that there was gonna be a study on parking. And, you know, have we looked at, you know, we've got a lot of surface lots. Have we looked at the feasibility of selling off the surface lots? It is my understanding that we can't sell off the structures because of bonding, but is part of that study gonna be looking at the feasibility of offloading some of our surface lots since we don't have the, you know, state of Michigan workers coming back like we thought they were going to from COVID?
Yeah, so in the proposed budget, there was $75,000 for a parking study that would be comprehensive. And I believe they just went through an RFP process, if I'm not mistaken.
All right.
I'm not sure. I believe a vendor was chosen. I don't know if a contract was signed yet, but I'll have parking confirm that.
And I have one more question. So
Okay.
when you have fee changes, on the slide that said fee changes, it has administration, what does that mean? The mayor, I mean, I'm assuming that administration means the mayor's office, and so I'm wondering what fees that the mayor's office would have. I'm looking at your slideshow right here. I don't know what.
Oh, the administration refers to Parks and Rec, not the mayor administration. That's Parks and Rec. Those came straight from them.
Okay.
Yep. So it goes Turner Dodge.
Turner
Cemetery.
Dodge is Park and Rec too, right?
Turner Dodge.
Isn't Turner Dodge
Yes.
Parks and Rec as
Yes.
well?
Yep.
Okay,
Well, I'm just
yep.
asking.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got it. I'm just looking at, I just didn't know what administration meant on this slide that you have here.
Oh, okay,
You're
yeah,
telling me
yeah,
it's
I-
Parks and Rec, and so I was
Yep.
like, the cemetery, Turner Dodge, community centers, those are all adult sports, those are all Parks and Rec as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was curious as to why you would carve out administration, and now you're telling me it's Parks and Rec, and so that's why I was wondering, because I was looking at this slide
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And I can make that correction in
All
the
right.
fee changes
The
just to
other
make
thing
more
I'm-
clear.
The other thing I'm curious about is, as we look at, we've all, most of us have been up here, and our internal auditor talked about the structural deficit that we are enjoying again, year after year. Correct me if I'm wrong, there's never been an edict where a department has been directed to reduce spending. Is that correct?
To my understanding, you're correct.
All right, so you know, but we've increased spending in departments consistently. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right,
My understanding.
just checking, thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to Councilmember Spatafor and Councilmember Hussein.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kirkland, Mr. Mills, thanks for being here tonight. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. Thank you. I'm going to pull you to the general fund revenue breakdown chart, if you would pull that up on your, in front of you, please. I don't need it on the screen, that's fine. Yeah, just, so I'm looking at a couple of the numbers here. Could you just, for clarity's sake, I know the interest and rents, the large increase makes a lot of sense, you know, with the ARPA interest, unanticipated revenues being budgeted there, so that one's fine. The other large increase I see is other revenues. Can you please remind me where 21.2% increase comes from?
That is the mayor's Ramadan. There was nothing budgeted for it last year.
Oh, it was
and-
admissions things, okay.
Yeah, those are
Okay. And then-
donations, contributions. things
Thank
like
you. Okay, that makes sense. And then the other one, I remember you saying that now. Thank you. Sorry for making you repeat it.
No.
Income taxes, though, I do see, you talked a little bit about the nearly 5% increase in revenues from 23's projected to 24's proposed. I'm looking back at 22's actual and 23's adopted, and it's about a 1.1% increase. And when you get to the actual, or projected rather, excuse me, it held steady at that. So where's this confidence that we're getting a 4 times increase in growth in income tax, growth in collections, reliability of the state tapes and things like that? Has something changed? It seems like just a big leap of faith that adds about $1.8 million of expenditure to revenue to the budget that we're probably spending when we have a structural deficit. So that's giving me pause.
Okay, I understand. So one of the things that we have seen is the increase in businesses again
Okay.
within the city. And the increase in businesses bring in employees with taxes.
Okay.
So we see those. And so that's what part of the increase also. So the withholding taxes have increased. And again, the state tapes.
When was the last time we amended the fiscal 23 budget?
We have not done the amendment just yet.
Will that amendment reflect that type of significant increase?
I will let you know that.
Okay. I'm asking because
Sure.
you're seeing it, so we're
Sure.
predicting that past behavior will predict future revenues. Is that the case in the 23 budget?
Absolutely. I will let you know. Get back with you on that.
Well, just to follow up on Councilmember Spatafor, I hate to interrupt you, but are you going to have those projections before we finish out this budget?
Projections for 23 or 24?
The 23 budget
The
projections.
23 budget, we have to pass this by the third Monday in May, so are you going to have those numbers to us before then?
Yeah, we are also working on the third quarter report as well. That's
Okay.
due at the end of the month. So
Thank you. It's just there's a lot of discrepancy there, and it would give me more comfort to approve something with that large of an increase with some sort of predictive document. Thank you. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
That's it? Okay, Councilmember Hussein.
Sure. One of my questions dealt with income taxes. Well, I was assuming maybe we were adding staff to Treasury, or so I appreciate the explanation. Article 7, Section 103 of our charter states that as part of, and we talked a lot about this this past September when we actually conveyed over our budget priorities, but it states that as part of the recommended budget that we will have a budget message, and within that budget message shall be an explanation as how to, or I should say, as to how the council priorities have been addressed, or maybe not addressed. Where is that?
could you explain what was that? What was that
This
number?
is Article 7, Section 103 of the city charter. And I recall when we actually conveyed these over, again, by October 1st, as contemplated in the city charter, that we made it very, very clear that the wording was shall, and that we shall receive it this year, and I don't see it anywhere.
And that's an oversight on my part. I started in November, but that's not an excuse. I will get you that. How, we address all of the council priorities. We will get you that.
I appreciate that. And then to Ms. Linden, I appreciate your line of questioning. That certainly, I think, helped everybody up here with our understanding of a few things. There was a question, though, I felt like, there were quite a few questions that weren't answered. But there was one where it was clearly not answered. I think there was a question about structural deficit and what in this budget, what's baked into this budget to actually start dealing with that. And your answer was, we're aware of that. What does that mean?
Right now, we have a group of, a team of individuals who are sitting down talking about the long-term plans of the city. It's not baked into this budget, you're correct there, but we will be presenting that information to council as it becomes available.
And again, timeline, is that?
We understand the urgency of it. We definitely understand the urgency of it. And our goal is to have something, hopefully, the next couple months to present to council in a short-term plan and a long-term strategy of what we can look forward to with the structured deficit.
So is again, per the charter, we have to pass this thing by the third weekend of May. Are we contemplating having that by then?
I don't know that we would have a full-fledged plan at that time. We will definitely do our part. We meet on a biweekly, every 2 weeks. So I will talk to the group and get right back to you.
Might need to start meeting weekly. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I have Councilmember Spitzley, then Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Madam President. I think following up on Councilmember Hussein's questions, and as I said, we have continued to whittle down our fund balance. Mm-hmm. We've continued to spend above our means here. The question was asked that has any of the departments been asked to take cost-cutting measures? And the answer is no. And has any, but the budgets in each department continues to go up. but now we're looking at, and I think that's great. So let me start there. I think that's great. We're looking at that. It would seem to me, because we asked these same questions last year, that we would have looked at it and started this study a little sooner, but here we are. But, you know, we are asking, I think, for me, not having this plan before we approve the budget, or having a direction on how we're going to address this structural deficit, because at some point, our fund balance, you know, we don't have ARPA dollars next year. So what are we gonna do when we're $8 million in the hole next year? You know, and we don't have ARPA dollars to, you know, plug it in. And so not having a plan before we approve the budget is really problematic to me. And I'm very concerned about that. I'm extremely concerned that we are going again into another year with, you know, reliance on our fund balance to balance our budget, but in the time that I've been here, we've never once asked our departments to implement cost-saving measures, not one time.
Okay, Councilmember Brown, and I just want to remind people, we still have other departments that we're, need to bring up. So Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, President Wood. And I concur with Councilwoman Spitzley's concerns. My question in line with that would be, we're talking about this health team to put these things together and working on it. Who are the individuals or what experts are in place, you know, to help with this plan that you're meeting with bi-weekly? Because I don't think that we have a defined team at this point.
I think we'll move to a weekly meeting. So it is Jackson Mills, myself, Jane, Deputy Mayor, and also Shelby.
So we have no outside expertise or,
Not at this time.
okay, and all the other questions, thank you so much, Ms. Linda. You asked very relevant questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions for you before we move on to information technology. One, you had indicated that the interest from the ARPA funds were in the revenue. So what you're telling me is that any expenditures that we've got, those interests are being eaten up for those expenditures. You don't have them segregated out, that it's being used for one specific thing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. My next question has to do with the tapes from the state for the income tax. Can you give me a figure on what you collected for the last 3 years, each year?
I don't have that. I don't have that handy, but I'd be happy to provide it.
Do you have any idea what you collected this year?
No, I do not.
Okay, so I'd like those numbers as soon as possible, because
Absolutely.
we're basing the fact that we're going to be getting these additional dollars, and I want to see what we're actually getting in.
Okay.
Okay, with that, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have information technology before us next. As we start the departmental budgets, if you will remember, there are a set of questions that you have. There are 7 questions that each department has been asked to answer. If they have information such as documents or annual reports, those will be provided to council members for their review, but that's not what they're going over at this particular time. So, Mr. Bumby, you are first, so you are the example for everyone.
Oh, gosh. Thank you. Last year I was a poor example because I tried to give you a nice presentation and I
And we
got
said
to
we
like
didn't
slide
want
number
it.
2 and you shut it right down. But
Yes, we
no,
did.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and super brief, of course, giving you plenty of time for questions. I have very brief responses to the 7 questions. about maybe the most exciting part of the City of Lansing's budget. It is to me, and that is the information technology budget. So I thought I'd just read your questions, give my very brief answers, and then give you time for whatever you want to throw my way. I know we got an allocation question. So the difference with your budget current fiscal year to the proposed, there's some slight hardware and software increases, but there's no ostensible, no change to our budget. We're not asking for anything new, no new programs, no changes. It's just Microsoft is charging more, hardware costs a little bit more, and those are the only changes in the IT budget. Number two was changes in service that we're responsible for. There's no proposed changes in service. Rate or fee increases, that doesn't really apply, so that's a no for us. Major equipment purchases, just the standard computer replacements for the departments. That's the only major equipment purchases for IT. Eliminating, combining, contracting of positions in your budget, and if so, provide specifics. There's no proposed changes in that area either.
You want to double check that? And under the chart of employees, it shows that you had 14 this year, you're having 16 next year.
I think that was a mid-year change this year. I believe that includes our communications person, which is in the mayor's office, but in my budget, and also the position that Ms. Linden had before she moved to auditor.
So you're paying Scott Bean.
Well, they're in my budget, and my budget is allocated to all city departments, including the mayor's office, and those two positions, I believe the thought was support all city departments. So they're in my department, but I don't have any changes to IT-specific positions. Valerie, when she was in Scott's position before, she was also in the IT budget, I think. But I think those are the two positions. I'd be happy to double-check.
Okay.
Sorry, what was the second position you mentioned besides communication?
The grants position that Ms. Linden was in previously was added kind of mid-year, I think, and that's one of those that are in the IT budget. Number 6, ARPA funding. We don't have any portion of that in IT. It'd be great, but I know there are a lot of people that could use it. And then number 7 is related to ARPA funding as well, so that's a NA for us.
Okay,
And then-
Emily, we'll turn to you. You had a couple questions on IT.
Thank you.
And then I have Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, hi Christopher. Thanks so much for your overview. For the record, can you just explain how the IT allocation works and how you all get to those numbers for each department?
Sure. Our department is charged with supporting the rest of the city employees and equipment, and we get all of the department's wants and needs that are approved, and they're in the IT budget. And then we charge out specific department items to those departments directly as part of the IT allocation, and then more general things like Microsoft software, those kind of things are spread amongst the entire city, based half on the employees in each department and half on the number of computers in this department. So bigger departments pay a larger share. But an example of direct allocation would be police-specific software or planning-specific software the rest of the city doesn't use. We don't spread those costs amongst all the departments. But some general software, hardware things we would spread amongst the departments. So bigger departments or departments with more people or more computers pay a larger portion of the IT budget.
Okay, great, thank you. And I don't have any further questions.
All right, I have Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you for being here today. We added 311, and we were, talking about that because they're doing help desk and answering calls and all. Oh,
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
Okay, now, thank you for being here. Last year, we had 311 added, to the services here in Lansing. How has that impacted your service and budget? Because I know that they were, a new department or a new, program who's supposed to be doing, answering the phones and helping. So has that decreased the allocation from other departments where it's now shifted to 311, or, they have several computers and so on and so forth. So if you could speak to that.
So while the 311 division of Delisa's Neighborhood Art and Citizen Engagement Department is not IT, we did assist them with starting up 311, and there is specific software and hardware that is used in that call center that is part of the IT allocation. One department-specific thing would be the Five9 customer service software that they use to take calls, and so that's specifically charged to that department. But and their computers that they use would be charged to them. But 311 is not specifically a part of the IT department, although we support them like the rest of the departments. I'm not positive I answered your question, so I want to make sure.
That's okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a couple questions. The first one is, I'm looking on the itemized list. On the third entry, it says Information Technology Fund from to fund balance. And then in 2023, it was 200,000, 2023 projected budget, 200,000, adopted budget. So for FY 2024 proposed budget, is this correct that you're anticipating 300, I don't even know how to say that, $300,000 from the fund balance?
The IT department is one of those few internal service funds that maintain a separate fund balance. When we don't spend it all in a previous year, we're able to utilize that to lessen the impact in the future year to departments. So in this case, our $8.1 million budget, we're only allocating $7.8 million of it. We're using some fund balance to lower what we're charging departments because we didn't spend it all this current year, and we're tracking to underspend our budget again. We have a vacancy. We have certain expenses that here we are in April, and we haven't spent it yet. So we're very comfortable that we'll be able to take $300,000 out of the IT budget and offset a little bit of the FY24 expenses. It was
So how
$200,000
does
last
an
year.
individual department run a fund balance?
Well, most departments don't. If it's a general fund department, then that's city money. But an internal service fund is a little bit different. And we're one of the few internal service funds that carries our residual funds from year to year. And rather than just let them pile up and pile up and pile up, we tend to ask for less in the future year. And I'll give you an example really quick. We have networking switches. They're an expensive part of our infrastructure that I did not budget in this request this year because we have sufficient fund balance to pay for that, and that is a citywide expense, and so that's something that we intend to spend our fund balance on, but it is not in this budget request.
So you have this fund, and I don't know, so that's why I'm asking.
Sure.
So it enables you to spend a certain amount of dollars without going through, a formal approval process? Because you have it, I'm still trying to understand how you can have this fund balance and what exactly it's used for. So you have this $300,000 fund balance. In 6 months from now, you decide that you need this particular widget that's gonna cost $198,000. So it's not in the CIP, but it's something that you can purchase because you have this additional funding that is unique to IT. Is that what you're saying?
I think there are a few other departments that share that, but what I will.
But I'm talking about IT.
Sure. So while not unique to IT, fairly unique in the city budget, and we do need an appropriation like any other department. Although internal service funds and our finance director and maybe our new auditor would say that there are certain appropriations that can be made administratively and could be made without coming before the city council to appropriate those dollars. And we're one of those departments where that, I believe, can happen and has happened before, an administrative appropriation versus a formal amendment.
Okay. your fleet equipment charge, it looks like it's an 83% increase, but it looks like it's more in line with the FYI 2022 actuals. But it looks like it's been increased by 83.3%. But overall, your budget, correct me if I'm wrong, is increased by almost 5%.
I would say that that sounds accurate. If we're talking about the FY23 budget of $3,000 and the increase of $2,500 to that to make it $5,500, that's the increase from the Fleet Division of Public Service. They have changed how they allocate the costs of renting a vehicle, and we have one city vehicle in IT, and our expenses have gone up for that one vehicle, how much they charge us to use that one Malibu. So while we had budgeted $3,000, our expenses are closer to $5,500 the last year that finished. So that's what we have in the upcoming budget. It's a $2,500 difference, but it looks like a big percentage.
Well, it is, yeah. So my last question maybe is, you talked about the IT allocation, and you said it was per equipment, computers or whatever, but do you also charge per person? So what if 5 people use one computer? You're charging for those 5 people, aren't you?
It's an imperfect model, but the best we've come up with, and the number of people is based kind of on a snapshot in time. So if Department A has 7 vacant positions and Department B is fully staffed, Department B is going to have a higher head count on that day where we take that snapshot to figure out how many employees are in Department B. But it's also, another method might be number of authorized positions per department, but then you'd be adversely impacting those departments. I'll say my old favorite, public service, that has a high vacancy factor at the moment. They'd be paying for people that they might not have that whole next year because some of those positions have been vacant a long time. But yes, our budget, after you pull out those department-specific things, we split it in half. So say it's $3 million for each. That $3 million is split amongst all the computers in each department, and the other half is split by the number of employees. And we look in it's called Active Directory, but it's just in our computer system of the people that have an account and can log in on day X is the number of people that we charge, that we split that cost amongst. And it isn't perfect. We don't currently take into account the number of cell phones each department has, not necessarily the number of iPads, not the number of help desk tickets they put in. There are a lot of other things we could, based on how many times we interact with the department would be a great method, but it just gets so complicated.
Yeah,
We
I
kinda
get it.
stuck with that.
I think it was just important for you to
Sure.
kind of explain that. And then my final thing is, on your information technology fund, under telephone, it looks like you have a significant increase in your proposed budget here as well.
Yep, and that's a good thing to bring up, and I appreciate you mentioning that. Good news, after more than a decade of having the same old Avaya system phones, we put out an RFP and selected a new provider, a cloud-based phone provider, and we baked the hardware cost into this proposed budget. It's an overall reduction in annual cost to the city. It's a good thing, new phones, and we'll pay less. But the hardware is an upfront thing, and so that's built into here. I may have to explain it once later too, once we get into it and work with finance, but we're gonna change how we allocate those costs. They may come from IT versus from finance in the future, because I think the bills are gonna come to us. But that's why that one is up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Spatafor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be quick. Christopher, thanks for being here. Real quick, you got a question in my head that I hadn't written. Are we going to have the ability for soft phones and things like that so folks can work in various places rather than just at one single desk?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
You will be, whether it's approved or not by your supervisor, that's up to them,
Sure,
but
right.
you will be able to answer your phone from Bermuda if you would like.
Can we do city council meetings there is the next question. All right, so then, actually, I have a question that's more of a question I just want to put out there for you, or have the question out there, Ms. Kirkland. I think maybe you're better suited to answer, but Emily, if you could put it on the the list. So you told us that you had a plan to spend $3,000 on your Chevy Malibu, and it's going to be more like $5,500, and I accept that as real. I'm wondering why the budget book has 0 increases in the projected year end for FY23, but everyone that has a presentation knows their costs are going up. So that's really, I'm using you as the vehicle to ask about the vehicle question that I want someone to please provide an answer for, and I don't expect it to be you.
Perfect. Then I will not answer.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Christopher. With that, we are moving on to EDP.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Christopher.
I think so. Okay, Barb, you saw how it was done.
I'm gonna do my best.
Okay.
Alrighty, so we can start off with the 7 questions.
Can you move the mic a little closer, please?
I
Thank
sure
you.
can, yep. And so, the first question, what is the difference with your budget from current fiscal year to the proposed budget? For parking, the response is that we should see a moderate increase in special event revenue as events start to return. Question number 2, are there any changes in services that your department is responsible for, and why? For the parking response, that is no changes. Question number 3, are there any,
Are you answering this for every single part of, or are you just highlighting the parking fund?
right now it's parking, yes.
So you're planning on going through each of your departments?
I
Is
mean,
that-
I'm not quite sure how you want me to do this. I did get responses from each of the 5.
Okay, we'll let you go through.
I could have consolidated, I just didn't know what to expect.
Okay.
Right? So parking does have anticipated fee changes, which I believe you have. Parking does not plan any major equipment purchases. Parking is eliminating a maintenance worker 200, replacing it with a field supervisor, and that eliminated positions should offset the majority of the cost for the field supervisor. Number 6, parking did receive $5 million in 2023 in ARPA funds to replenish the depleted parking fund due to COVID. And then the final question, does the proposed budget include a carry forward of ARPA funds? The answer is no for parking.
Okay.
For planning, oh, I'm sorry.
Since you did these separately, Emily will do your questions on parking, and then I have Councilmember Spitzley.
Hi, Barb. Thanks for being here. So my question is kind of the same. Is there anything being done internally in the parking department to address the structural deficit that parking's facing?
So we are moving forward with the parking study, which will make recommendations.
Okay, great. Is there, I think you maybe already set a date that that's supposed to come back.
Oh,
Or-
we actually have it back, and I
Oh.
believe that the proposals have been evaluated, and, go ahead.
Yes, we did get the proposals back. We got 6 proposals back. We reviewed them. We are now negotiating with the highest ranked firm involved with that. We hope to have that done before the new budget year starts. We actually have a date of the end of this month for it to start, but I don't think we'll get that done in time. But
Okay.
we'll be close enough. One of the things that you want to bring up, Council.
And could you introduce yourself for,
Oh, sorry about
we
that.
make
For the
sure we
record,
have-
Hal King, parking manager for the city.
thank you.
Councilmember Spitzley had asked earlier on about the possibility of our trying to sell one of our properties or dispose of some of our properties in other manners. One of the things we have in the RFP is to have the firm that's selected bring in a commercial real estate agent or bring in somebody that handles that in their own company so that we can have them review our properties as they stand right now and see if there is a good way for us to dispose of some of this and maybe continue to give the level of service that we believe the city needs.
Okay, great, thank you. And so the parking department was not told by finance or the administration or anyone to cut back on spending at all? They were said, budget as usual?
I'll be honest, I don't know who prepared this budget.
Okay,
Wasn't Hal, he's new.
right.
Yeah, I just started in January.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Oh, I'm not, and Barb, I'm not mad at you, but I just find that fantastic. That's something else right there. So, what? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So, the $5 million ARPA, let me understand, parking ran a deficit last year, right? Did it run a deficit the year before?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I can get that information.
And you're going to, thank you, I appreciate that. And I know you weren't here, and I know you weren't here, so that's fine. So the question, so we're doing the study to figure out how we can address the structural deficit ongoing, is that correct?
Yes.
How much is your budget increase this year in the parking office?
Let's take a peek.
And that's going to be a recurring question, Madam President, that I'm going to be asking. As we're looking at, using ARPA dollars and looking at our fund balance, I will be asking each department how much increase that their budget is. Because I think that's important as we're looking at, again, using ARPA dollars and taking our fund balance to address it.
Thank you.
7.7%?
Are you asking?
Yeah, that's what I meant, yeah, roughly.
Yeah, if that's what it says, then that's,
And again, I'm not, Barb,
Right.
I'm not trying to,
right. No,
brag
no.
on you, but.
I'm trying to navigate through 152 pages.
Yes.
So please be patient.
All right, thank you. All right, I think that's all let me make sure. I think that's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Barb, I do have a couple of questions. If you look at the line item under parking, in looking at this, I'm looking at lot 37, and it shows attended, and the projected budget for the end of this year is $300,000, but we're projecting another $150,000 for next year. If you look at ramp 3, North Grand Ramp attended, you had $700,000, which is the projected budget for '23. For the proposed budget is $900,000, so that's an additional $200,000.
Are you looking under revenues? What page are you looking at?
I'm looking under your revenues, yes.
Okay.
And it doesn't have a page number, so I can't help you.
It's okay, I think I found it. So your question is,
I'm trying to get a handle on these increases, and again, I understand that you didn't supply the numbers, but how did these numbers come about with these enormous increases that we're talking about, 150,000, 200,000? We also have another one of almost $200,000 if you go to parking fines. So with those alone, we're talking almost $750,000. So I'm trying to understand how we got there, and if you can't give us the answers, if you could try to figure out who put these numbers together and how they came up with. Because if we don't meet these revenue projections, then we're further in the hole than what we are now.
Right. We will definitely look into that, and, I mean, I have a good idea of who did this, so we can definitely get that information for you.
Okay. All right. Are there any more questions on parking? Seeing none, okay, if you could go on to the next one, please.
The next one is planning. All of the answers to those questions for the planning department are no.
Okay, are there any, Vice President Garza?
Thank you, Council President. So with the no fee difference in the proposed budget, I'm hearing that you guys are looking at potentially hiring a, deputy something or other for the department. Can
Yes.
you explain that, please?
A deputy director?
Deputy director for the planning department?
Yes. And you're asking me to explain where those funds are coming from?
Yeah.
I think that we have a lot of vacant positions right now, and I think that the revenue will come from those vacant positions, at least for this current year.
Okay, and are you planning on replacing somebody full-time, Brian McGrain's position?
Oh, yes.
So that would be another 120 something of the proposed budget. So you'll just be pulling this 120, or not necessarily you, but the department will be pulling I heard it's a $120,000 deputy position from other positions that are not being filled right now?
For this current upcoming fiscal year, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Councilmember Spitzley.
So for the planning department, what's the % increase in the budget for this year? And I knew the question to the last one, but I can't find it. Oh, I see. It's,
Did you-
all right,
did you find-
0.7%, I got it. General fund administration / planning. So you put all that in the same category. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, take the next one.
All righty. The next one is building safety. Building safety, the answer to question number 1, their proposed budget is slightly increased from last year as wages have increased. And they also would like to raise some fees. There is a fee schedule in here as well. The answer to question number 2 is no. The answer to question number 3 is yes. And then question number 4, and question number 5, and question number 6, and question number 7, the answers are no.
Okay. Councilmember Spitzley.
I apologize, I lost my train of thought. Which department are we on right now?
I'm sorry.
Building safety.
This, of course we are. And I'm looking on here, and you guys have a 6% increase in your budget for this
Yes.
year. Fleet equipment charge, again, looks like it's 333.3% from $15,000 to a proposed 2024 budget of $65,000.
That's a large increase. I
That
can look
really-
into that.
Thank you, yes, it is. So, and I'm assuming it's generally in line with what Christopher Mumby was saying, but I don't know.
I don't know either, but I will definitely look into it for you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Counsel-
And I think that, yeah, that was it for me. Thank you. I apologize.
Councilmember Spatafor.
Yeah, this is probably, again, not, it's a vehicle question. So it looks like every time there's a large vehicle increase, it's actually more in line with what was spent in FY 2022. So it'd be interesting just to hear why 23, we went with a different model for vehicle allocation versus what we're going with for 24. So maybe if Emily, if you could follow up
And
with
it,
that.
yeah, and if, when public service comes in, if we can have them.
Because the increase from 22 to 24 is not as substantial as the increase from 23 to 24 when we clearly changed funding models.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, ma'am.
Alrighty, next is the Development Office. And the answers to those questions are all no.
Are there any questions on the Development Office? Those are mainly our community development block grants and things like that, which we've had already. None? Okay.
Alrighty, so then moving on to code enforcement. Code enforcement, all of the questions that are all no, except for there is a slight fee increase. There's a request, I think, for a new fee for, if I remember correctly, it is for failure to
Non-licensed fee.
register, yeah. Yep.
Hey. Are there any questions on that? Seeing none? Okay. Does that do it with you?
I feel like it does.
Okay.
Thanks for being gentle.
All
Better
right.
prepared
Well,
next year.
We haven't passed the budget yet. Just wait.
Yeah. Excuse me, Madam President, may I ask a question, please? May I actually give a response to one of the questions that was asked?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. With regards to the budget preparation for many of the budget for planning and economic development, obviously this was done by our former director, working together with the finance department. And probably at that time, it was probably Joe McClure. But again, just want to make sure that these numbers were looked at closely together with the individuals that were there at that time and with our finance department.
I appreciate your answer, Jane, but it doesn't answer our questions on how these numbers came to be. Unless you're going to bring back Joe and you're going to bring back Brian, we can't, you can't answer those. And
No, but we will get you answers to those questions with regards to some of the increases that you saw. We'll make sure we get them. But please be assured, these numbers are not, just there. We did look at them, and they were prepared by individuals who were familiar with the department. Thank you.
Again, until I understand the formula that was put together, I cannot substantiate that those numbers are correct and are part of what we're looking at. This is why we ask the questions. Councilmember Spitzley.
And this is my concern and kind of my irritation is, you put Joe McClure's name on the budget, and it seems to me that every time there's something wrong or there's a question, they're like, oh, Joe McClure did it. I'm concerned about that. Where's it? That sounds like to me that, he's gone, he's retired. So if there's a question in the budget that no one can answer, it's because Joe McClure did it. I don't understand that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That takes us to fire. Well, hello, Chief. How are you tonight? Thank you. You've seen how this goes, so if you can start off and Again, we know that your annual report was part of the documentation that we did receive, and we do have that in our packet. If we can start off with your questions, that would be great.
Okay, the difference with fire budget from current fiscal year to the proposed budget.
Can you move the microphone closer? And is the green light on?
And
On the microphone, there should be a button.
There we go. Can you hear me?
There we
Okay,
go.
sorry about that.
Thank you.
The difference between this current year and the fiscal year to the proposed budget, there's no major operating differences from the fire department from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. Outside of increases for fuel and equipment rentals. So it was nominal from that perspective, but there were no program increases. Number two, are there any changes in services that your department is responsible for, and if so, why? Yes, there are some changes in services because we have stood up a robust community risk reduction program, but we did not request any additional budgetary funding for this program. We looked internally, we made some decisions based on line item, transfer of monies with line items that could support what these new programs look like. So we did it internally by conducting a deep dive on the department and willing to move some monies from Peter to Paul, if you will, to stand up and support some of the new programs that we felt were necessary for the community. Number three, are there any rate or fee increases, and if so, why? There are no rate or fee increases from the fire department. Number four, are there any major equipment purchases proposed in this budget? Outside of the approved capital improvement budget of $24,000, which will be utilized to replace our swift water rescue boats and a couple of our all-terrain vehicles that we use during crowd control and special events to access off-road areas. Outside of that $24,000 amount, that was part of our approved capital improvement budget. Number five, are there any eliminating, combining, or contracting of positions in your budget? And if so, provide specifics. There are no eliminating, combining, or contracting positions. Number six, did your department receive any ARPA funding in the current fiscal year? And if so, how was it spent? Yes, we did receive allocated ARPA funds to the tune of about $300,000 worth of turnout gear, $1.7 million for a fleet upgrade, which will be used to purchase a new aerial apparatus, $780,000 that we are using to help support the 10-year Stryker ALS 360 program with a couple years worth of payments from that $780,000. Number seven, does your proposed budget include a carry forward of ARPA funds? If not, how will your department programs change because of not having those ARPA funds? There are no carryover funds from ARPA within the fire budget.
Okay, thank you. Emily, did you have any questions for fire?
Hi, yes, just a couple of quick questions. Thanks so much for being here, Chief. So one of the items under suppression, the overtime FLSA, looks like it has been $100,000 the last few years, and this budget proposes $10,000 for that line item. Is that correct, or is that was that cut that much?
That would not be correct. FLSA is a federal mandate because of our work schedule.
Okay. So maybe that's just
I would
missing
need
a
to
zero.
take a look at that and ask some questions because that was an oversight if that is how it was recorded.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then just one additional question. So under the public safety expenditures for the police or for the fire department, it looks like that decreased by 1.5%. Can you explain the decrease there?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. So under revenue, on the public safety expenditures page, so this is page 9 of the budget book, it shows that the fire public service, public safety, excuse me, line item decreases by 1.5%. Can you just explain why that?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I will report out
Okay, awesome.
before the week is out to get that information to you.
All right. Thank you so much. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. And the same question about the fleet equipment charges is consistent, checking out. You have a total operating increase of 6.4%. I'm looking at, is what I'm seeing here, is your budget's been increased by 6.4%. I'm looking at the information technology charge. You have a 5% increase in the charge for IT. Have you guys bought new software or equipment, or what's up with that?
We bought new hardware. We
Okay.
needed to update the EMS computers on the ambulances because we were having spotty coverage, which actually was slowing down the return to service time of our ambulance crews. They would get to the hospital, they would deliver a patient, they would look to complete the paperwork. We had a very clunky system, if you will, as it relates to the overall internet hotspot coverage, and it was delaying our ability to complete those necessary medical reports. And so we did upgrade to some new GTAC laptops, which advanced the whole process, and it actually increased the time that it took to complete those reports, which in turn increased the turnaround time for our crews to get back in service so that those calls would not stack up and back up because of the out-of-service time completing reports.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. A couple of questions that I have for you, Chief. I know that you still have not settled, you're very close to settling the contract with IAFF. But in looking at your personnel line on page 74, it actually shows a reduction of minus 2.3%. So was there the potential of an increase for wages baked in to the budget, or was it not baked into the budget?
It was not baked in. We currently are sitting at about 15 vacancies. Over the course of the next 6 months, that will double based on the projected attrition. So what we're trying to do is plan for that attrition. We did submit an application to the federal government for a SAFER grant, which to the tune of about 20 to 25 new positions to help us with the projected attrition that we know we are faced. One level of conversation that I've had with the fire board, with our members, the City of Lansing Fire Department does not have a deferred retirement option plan. So when our members hit their eligibility date, they retire. They don't have that option like a lot of public safety organizations, fire departments, where, okay, I can hang out for another 3 to 4 years.
Just a minute. If we have a conversation in the back, if you could please take it into the lobby area so it isn't bleeding over. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, ma'am. A lot of the projections are based on that attrition that we know we are faced with. Right now, recruitment is huge. It's a big challenge for us because our candidate pool has shrunk while the need for qualified candidates have increased. And so all of the departments are basically vying for the same level of candidates. What that is doing within the market is causing a bit of stagnation because you've got candidates that are actually shopping for the best opportunity. They may have a solid job offer in hand, and we've
Or a
experienced,
bonus.
yes, exactly. We've experienced ghosting, no calls, no show, because there are multiple offers being offered to these limited candidates, and they are making the best decision based on their family and personal lives, and sometimes that leaves us on the outside looking in. It is a challenge. We anticipate it's going to get worse before it gets any better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think that answers our questions that we have for you this evening, and we appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you.
What we're going to do is we're going to move city council and city attorney to another agenda, and we will do finance and then finish up with setting the public hearings, the participation agreement, the settlement, and then finishing up with the Ovation Center. So anyone that is here for any of those other items, we will be doing them. We are in committee of a whole still. We will be starting Council, we hope in the next half hour, 45 minutes. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so I'll make this really quick. On the Treasury, the answers are no for all of the,
And that's the difference in your budget from the current year to the proposed, there's no difference.
not any, we didn't make any differences there. I
Okay.
mean, there's some differences, but not because of something that we went out and did, or personnel costs. I mean, those things have gone up across the board for everyone. IT, because of, we have, there are allegations, so, but not anything that we did. And then on finance, the answers are no, except for when it gets down to, did we receive ARPA funding in the current fiscal year? And yes, we did. We received $1 million for the BSNA software and $200,000 for the grants person for the from ARPA funding. None of that is being carried forward. Actually, there was funds left over, and that we will be submitting a resolution on.
Okay. Are there, Emily, do you have any questions?
Hi, yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. So you mentioned the finance, upgrading the financial software. Are we on schedule and within budget to complete that? You mentioned it's under budget and that's the ARPA money that you're moving over.
Yes.
Okay, and then we're also on schedule?
On schedule as far as,
Like, when will that be complete?
we don't have a kickoff date yet. We're hoping to kick off this summer. They have not given us a complete calendar, so initially we thought it would be spring, but it got moved back to the summer. What we are doing in the meantime is cleaning up our current system, making sure that the data that we have in one solution, because ideally what we have in one solution should roll right over to BSNA, and so if we have clean data in the system, we'll carry over good data. So that's
Okay.
what we're spending our time doing.
And then just to clarify, when you say they, you mean BSNA, so they moved to the...
They have not, we had hoped initially that they would be kicking off in this spring, but we're still waiting for a final calendar from them.
Okay. And then, so for this fiscal year, for both the temporary help and contractual services line items, it looks like you're already over budget for both of those. And then I see that next year is kind of, the same exact budget. Are you expecting for your contractual services and temporary help budget to still be, over, are we having it in the same budget and then it's going to go over budget again, or?
So we counted all as personnel, so even though it may go over on that line, because we have vacancies within there, we have 2 vacancies down in Treasury, and so we have seasonal people helping with the processing of the income tax returns, and then we have 2 vacancies in finance. So we have seasonal people there helping us. We have people helping us too.
So the answer is no, you're not expecting?
No, we're not
But those
expecting.
line items
Thank
are
you.
staying the same, and you're expecting to go over budget again next
Well,
year?
hopefully not, but we'll work on that, but we counted it all as personnel costs.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions for finance at this point? My only other question would be, it's my understanding that we signed a contract in January for the BSNA, and so do we have any understanding from them what the delay is?
They had other projects that they were also working on, and initially they thought that they could be here and kick off in the spring. Our communications with them is their hope that the goal is to kick off in the summer. And as soon as, I'm
Has
sorry.
anyone talked to them about a reduction in the contract that we have because they're delaying implementation?
No, we have not talked to them about that.
Is that something?
I'd be happy to do that.
That's something I would appreciate you
Okay.
taking a look at.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that moves us into our action items. The first action item we have is setting a public hearing for the Lansing City Council budget. Vice President Garza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move placing the resolution on the council agenda to set the public hearing for the City of Lansing budget for fiscal year 23-24 for May 8th.
All right, we have a motion. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Passes unanimously. Next is the Community Development Block Grant. Vice President Garza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move placed in this resolution on the council agenda to set the public hearing for the CDBG Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 23-24 for April 24th, 2023.
All right, we have a motion. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Next is the participation agreement for Masters settlement. Is that something, Jim, that you're going to take?
Yes, I can take it. This
Okay.
is a resolution authorizing the participation of the city of Lansing against 4 defendants in a class action on the opioid litigation. The 4 defendants are Walmart, CVS, Allergen Finance, and Teva Pharmaceuticals. This is in connection with other municipalities in the state and with the state of Michigan. And what will happen as a result of this settlement is the city of Lansing will receive, together with the state, 50%. The state will get 50% of the share, and we'll get 50% of the share. We've already received one settlement allocation, and others will come after this. So this authorizes the city attorney to enter into this settlement agreement.
Okay, with that, I see we have Councilmember Spatafor that's got a question.
Jim, just real quick, I've read the resolution, but just for the record, it does not authorize the acceptance or the expenditure of any of the settlement dollars.
Correct, it doesn't. And it'll go just like the other group of dollars went to finance, and then they have to come back here and appropriate.
Thank you.
Just so we understand, it comes back to council, comes back to us. Okay. With that, are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is the Ovation Concert Center. And Dominic, that's you. Come on down. In your packet of, that you have in front of you, it is item H. And that is pink, fuchsia, whatever we want to call it. Okay, Dominic.
So, I don't, Jim, did you want to describe what we're voting on here, the resolution and?
Okay. All right.
Hi.
Hello, sir.
So, what's that? Okay.
I said hello,
Oh,
sir.
sorry.
I
That
well,
actually is
I
part of
haven't
it.
thrown anything at you, so you're good to go, so.
So far.
Well, you never know.
So the resolution is fairly straightforward. It's a resolution to purchase property. Purchase price is described. The appraisal amount is described, and I think the appraisal was supplied to council as a supplemental exhibit. Just to talk through really quickly, because this is something that the city does not do very often, is actually buy large parcels of land. Usually we sell large parcels of land or small parcels of land. But the purchase process does not require a lot of the same things that are required in the sales process. There's no placement on file. There's no wait times. Most of the restrictions on what we have to do are frankly negative for the city. We have to get an appraisal, and then there's a very long list of things that are designed to make sure we're not taking advantage of people when we buy property, that we're not trying to sort of sidestep eminent domain rules by making sure that we pay at least an appraisal price. And I can get into nerdy stuff about values that are deemed to be too close to a purchase price or an appraisal price or an estimated value. so that you get in trouble if somebody sues. I don't think that's going to happen here. But in any event, this is resolution to approve the purchase of property for a certain dollar amount. And I'm happy to answer any legal questions about that.
Are there any questions on the legality, Councilmember Spatafor?
Well, yeah, who's 500 Washington?
I think some of the questions that we had asked for some additional information was the funding, for you to go over that, Dominic.
Yeah, sorry, what was the 500 block?
Yeah, sorry, Councilman President Wood.
Go right
Yeah,
ahead.
Who is 500 South Washington LLC?
So 500 South Washington LLC is one of the LLCs that exists related to the development that's happening on that overall square block. It's basically Westpac, which is Pat Smith's development corporation, and then that one is actually entirely controlled by Pat Smith or Westpac, and some of the other developments on the parcel I think involve Dymaxion.
So these are separate. This is separate from the Lake Trust building.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's, I mean,
it's next door, but it's
correct.
not a property on which we've approved tax abatements and things like that, and now we're buying the property back.
Correct. It is
buying the property.
If you're talking about the tax abatements, the only thing that was approved is there's a brownfield plan that the description of the brownfield plan technically occupies that entire block.
Okay.
But this is us buying a piece of that has nothing on it. It's got pavement on it at the moment.
This will have no meaningful effect on the TIF.
No, correct, because the city's activities would be tax exempt. So.
Correct, but
Yeah.
we're taking a taxable property and making it tax exempt.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Also correct, because the brownfield plan does not anticipate any tax revenue being generated on this portion of that block.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
So as far as the funding, would you like me to describe the capital stack? So we have the PEG fee bonding portion that will be bonded against future PEG fee revenue is $6 million. We have $2.5 million on hand from PEG fees. We have a $2 million state appropriation. We have a $5 million grant from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We have a $750,000 federal appropriation and $900,000 in private fundraising. So we have the last time I was before you, we described a fundraising feasibility study. We did a market feasibility study and also specifically fundraising feasibility study that identified $3 to $5 million to be raised in the community, and we have 900,000 of that currently on hand. And so what we have done is there's a version of the project that can be built for what we do have on hand that all adds up to about $17 million. But our plan is as that fundraising continues, it will be used to enhance the project. So right now we have a project that can be built for that money on hand. And then we will do things like get nicer sound equipment and lighting equipment, adding more amenities as we go. But this is a complete version of the project that gets the doors open with lighting and sound, and it will just be enhanced from here.
Councilmember Spatafor, Councilmember Spitzley.
Thanks, Dominic. You mentioned we're not at our fundraising goal, and I know the MEDC strategic funds or the MSF grant was reliant on reaching a certain fundedness level before expenditure, otherwise we have to pay it back. Do you know what numbers those were based on?
No, that was already the PEG funding that we had on hand. So the private fundraising that we're doing is all enhancements to the project and operating endowments to increase.
It was just 6.5 million?
For?
The MSF grant that came to the city.
That was 5 million.
Was 5 million,
Yeah.
correct. And that was contingent upon raising the total
On the
amount for
city
proposal.
contributing at least 8 million. But now we've actually had, since we've started this conversation, we've had more PEG fees come in.
Like tonight?
So that's why, I mean, not tonight, but it's 2.5. Initially, the budget that we submitted to the state only had $2 million of on-hand PEG fees in it.
Okay.
Now we're at 2.5 because time has gone by.
So that's different than the MEG grant. We're talking the MSF grant.
Right. The MSF grant is not contingent on any of the private fundraising that we discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. Are there any, environmental conditions on the site that we have to worry about? You're tearing down a pretty old building.
That building's actually being rehabbed, so.
Okay, you're rehabbing a pretty old building.
Yeah, so there is, in the budget, there's asbestos abatement and remediation of that before it gets rehabbed.
There's this, you said asbestos abatement and what else?
Just numbers, like the amount that was required to rehab an older building as opposed to building new.
But asbestos is the only thing you anticipate
Well,
coming up against in that older
So,
building?
quite a
rehabbing
bit,
it?
because, it's pretty, the condition of that building was, we were very surprised how good of condition it was in. In fact, what we hadn't even accounted for in our initial plan was not being able to really use the basement for much more than storage. But we actually, when we went down there and the architect was checking it out and the contractor, we saw that it's actually 8-foot ceilings down there. And so we actually have space for the media center. We'll actually have some of our studios down there.
Okay,
So there's actually more square footage available than we planned on, which was nice.
thank you.
I have Councilmember Brown, and then Emily, did you have any questions on this funding?
No, I think I'm still waiting on some of the funding information overall, and then I'll probably have questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, President Wood. Thank you for being here. So to make sure I understand or I'm clear, you do have the funding for the project secured at this point, all of the money that's needed?
Correct. It would just be, if we froze in our tracks and didn't continue to do any fundraising, it would just be, maybe a bit more of I wouldn't say bare bones, but, it's a economical version of the project. But with this kind of facility providing entertainment and amenities, we obviously want it to be as great as it can possibly be. So as we complete the rest of that fundraising process, we will be adding those modules back in, like a better lighting and sound system and things like that.
So do you, do you have the money to do the project, or you're saying, no, we're going to wait so we can get the bells and whistles?
No,
Or is it?
no, we have the capital stack currently exists, matches with the, I believe, $16.9 million construction budget.
So the 16.9 million or 17 million is the bare bones, is what you're describing?
Yeah, so with this kind of thing, with sound systems and lighting systems, you can pretty much spend what you want. You know what I mean? They have extremely high, sky's the limit, right? So as that fundraising comes in and we get more community investment, which we have a lot of interested parties, people that are interested in naming rights and sponsorships, as that comes in, we'll add those enhancements back in. But what we have now is a facility that the doors will be open with fixtures and furnishings and everything we need.
Okay, and if this is in line, could you speak to why we're getting a new building, and a lot of constituents have talked about, why not put this in the Lansing Center instead of buying another property?
So the close to $8 million in investments from the state and federal appropriation is tied to this location, being it was, the $5 million specifically from MEDC was an urban core revitalization case that was being made about bridging downtown and Riotown in that specific location. So that funding is kind of tied to this idea. And also the Lansing Center, I don't think has, I think what we actually discussed this, that, now that they're getting busy again, that they're going to be using all their square footage for events. So just turning part of that into a concert venue didn't make sense when we're actually going to need that. Now that we're unlocking more business at the Lansing Center by having more hotels downtown, they're actually going to see an increase in their convention business. So.
Thank you. And lastly, I've spoken about my concerned with the financial sustainability. So
Yeah.
what is the plan if, we purchase the building and it goes forward and you don't get the other fundraising dollars? What does that look like
Yeah.
for the city? Because
So,
we've been-
yeah, sure. So let's say we don't raise any more money and we build it as we're contemplating. We do have the pro forma shows it operating in the black. Of course, we should always prepare for a worst case scenario, and that is the beauty of building a facility like this without debt service. The capital is in place, so it's not going to have a huge monthly debt payment to make, other than that which can be paid back by the PEG fees, right? So the PEG fee bonding has its own repayment mechanism in place. The building, once the doors are open, won't be burdened with a big monthly debt payment to make. So let's contemplate a extremely worst case scenario. Let's say 2, 3, 4 years, no concerts are coming, people aren't going to the concerts that are booked. Like, let's talk about the absolute worst case scenario. I think we have a pretty good worst case scenario in that sense, where we will have a nice facility that, is worth $18 million or so. We would probably look at selling that, right? I mean, I'm assuming that we could, if you imagine you have to sell it for a fire sale price of $10 million, this $18 million building, the city would be completely made whole, and we'd have a brand new media center still, because we'd hold on to that part. We would just sell the Ovation part. So when you look at worst case scenarios, that seems like a pretty good one, if it doesn't work out.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate
Sure, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Vice President Garza, and a vote puts this on the agenda for a vote, which is a 5-vote item, once it gets council.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Pardon? Tonight. Yes, Councilmember Brown.
Sorry about that. And then just one clarification. Who owns this property? I wasn't clear. I apologize. Thank you.
501 South Washington LLC, is that, or 500 South Washington?
500 South Washington LLC.
And then you said who owns that? I wasn't clear if there was multiple parties or one.
Pat Smith, Westpac Development is, it's an LLC, but it's an LLC of his. So he's the developer that basically bought up and then developed the rest of that entire block.
Okay. Thank you.
People who own all those other apartments.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, Vice President Garza.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I move placing this resolution on the council agenda for the purchase of real property for the Public Media Center and Ovation concert venue.
We have a motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 7-1. Thank you. Okay, I believe that was the last item that we had on the agenda this evening, and so we will recess for 5 minutes and then come back to our council meeting. We're in recess.